So the next thing that we want to do here is introduce the form tag. Right now what we have is something we might call a form in English, but technically in HTML it's not considered a form. It is just three inputs that are not related. So remember, the point of the form, it's just a container where we put our inputs. So yes, they can exist individually outside of a form, and sometimes we will have that. But if this is one form, one packaged up thing that we want to submit together, then it makes sense for us to make a form tag. So I'm going to go ahead and put this data inside the form tag and save it. And remember, in a form, there are two attributes we discussed. There's action, which is where the form sends data to. And then there's also method, which is what HTTP method, get or post. And just as a refresher, that shortcut, command / to get the comment. Okay, so if we refresh the page, nothing will change, or it will appear like nothing changes. There is one really small aesthetic change. So if I add some text down here, and I don't have the form tag, I refresh the page, you'll see that everything is in line. As soon as I add the form tag, however, the form pushes, it's a block level element, it pushes down that text to the new line. So a very minor thing, but other than that, it looks identical. There is functionally a change though. My form now, if I refresh the page, it actually does something. It's not very impressive, but if I fill out my username and some password and I hit submit, pay attention right here, and you'll see my page actually refreshes. My data disappears. This button to refresh the page is engaged briefly, as you can see. So my form is being sent. The thing is, it's just being sent to the same place where I currently am. So by default, if I don't specify an action, it's going to go to the exact same place where I am, just refresh the page. And if I don't specify a method, it's going to be a GET request. So we could go in and change that. We could say action and method equal, and let's change them to something else. Let's do action equals http://wikipedia.com. Method will be a GET request. Refresh the page. Let's fill out some data in here. Fill out my form. Click submit. This time, it's not going to send a request to the same page I am on. It's going to send a request to Wikipedia. And technically, this should be wikipedia.org, but they're smart enough that they realize people try and go to .com all the time, and it just redirects to .org. Okay, so that's the point of action. It's where we send data to. Of course, we're not really going to send data to Wikipedia or Google or Facebook from a form. We're going to send it to our own server, our own backend that we create. But we don't have that yet, so for now, we're just demonstrating that we can alter where the data goes by altering the action. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of both of these and just keep it as form, where action is going to refresh the same page that we're on, and method is going to be get. And if you're feeling at all confused about that, we will spend a lot of time talking about HTTP requests and methods and actions, so we will get there. For now, this is purely about the front end of making the form. So there's one other thing I want to talk about here is that when we actually submit this form, the data is sent along with this request. And there's a way for us to see that. So if we give a name to each piece of data that we want to be sent, so it's a name attribute, I'm going to call it username on the username input, and then I'm going to say name equals password on the password input. And I save this. I type in a username, Rusty, password will be test123. Pay attention up here as I submit this. And you'll see I get my data added in this new format that we haven't seen. It's called a query string. Another one of those topics we'll be devoting a lot more time to when we get to Express. Basically, it's a question mark followed by key value pairs, separated by ampersands. So I have username, which is the name that I set, equals Rusty, which is the value from that input. password is the name I set, equals test123. So the whole point of this is that we can give names to our data, to our pieces of data, so that we can then retrieve them later. So of course, we wouldn't actually send a password through the URL. We don't actually let a user or any user see the password. And that's because we use a post request usually, rather than a get request. There are ways of getting around this. So again, this is all for later in the class. But what's important is that this isn't something I'm showing to you because you'll do it all the time. I'm showing it to you because it illustrates the fact that when we type something into a form, and I give it some data, and I click submit, the data is taken out of that form and a request is sent somewhere. And in this case, it's sent to the exact same place where we already are. But if we change this to be action and go back to Wikipedia, wikipedia.org, username Rusty, password test123, you'll see it takes me to wikipedia.org and it adds my data here. So we've successfully sent a request using that form, and in that request, the data was extracted from the username and password fields and then sent along with the request. So that's the foundation of all the types of forms that we're going to do. It's not always a GET request, but our forms later on are going to extract data out, send it somewhere, and then we'll process the data and receive it on the back end.